Even if you don't like or watch Jujutsu Kaisen, you certainly know of Satoru Gojo and his mesmerizing eyes. Yeah, he might have been compared to Kakashi from Naruto when he was first introduced. The blindfold didn't really help, but he's shown that he's a beast of his own and often way more ruthless than the former Anbu ever was. So let's get trapped in Unlimited Void, find out everything about Gojo. Born in 1989, Satoru Gojo's simple existence created a massive shift in Jujutsu society immediately. To the surprise of no one, he was already on a hit list as a child. Even so, it wasn't easy to get close to someone within the big three clans. As he got older, his powers grew exponentially, giving rise to more fear within the Jujutsu world, at least for those that were up to no good. Also, Toji just had to state his curiosity as to this blessed child, and he definitely can't say that he was disappointed. He was the only person to ever feel his presence in his life. Likewise, Gojo made curse users too afraid of his powers to assassinate him or continue their homicidal ways. In a sense, Gojo's birth worked both as a means to keep curses and evildoers in check, but he had the downside of drawing out even stronger threats and curses to counter his effect on the world. The world always finds a way to balance itself out after all. And thanks to Gege finally giving us some info, we know that Gojo lived with his parents in Kyoto, where he was also born. He never really gained a dialect from living there since he was either on missions or training from a young age, so he uses the standard Tokyo Ben. We can assume that Gojo had a decently privileged life as the chosen child that he was, which led to his rebellious and cocky attitude when we see him as a teen. In fact, Satoru found his parents overbearing, as well as training he was pushed into, and chose to leave to join Jujutsu Tech in Tokyo, likely because they were using his fame to raise themselves in society, despite not being strong themselves. It probably didn't help that he had no siblings. Also, he would run off and skip classes whenever he could, just to be free of the stern upbringing, which explains why Ogami and company saw him walking alone. In his second year at Jujutsu High, he's in the same class as Suguru Geto and Shoko Ieri, and not fully in control of his abilities yet. He even had Gravere idol pictures in his dorm room, until Ieri thought it was too cringy and he took them down. And always needing to wear sunglasses to control his 6 eyes just makes it more creepy if you ask me. Despite having students above him, no one really approached him because of his standing in society and the power he had. So it makes sense that he was closer to people in his grade. Not to mention his only teachers were within the big three family, and himself due to how long it had been since someone was born with both techniques. Even though he's a brat like no other, Gojo's given the important task to protect the Star Plasma Vessel from being assassinated along with Geto. They are the strongest around, honestly, and for the most part it's easy to make sure that she's safe between the non-curse technique havers and crappy fighters. But they're just a means to an end by a cunning mastermind who belong to the big three clans. After a trip to Okinawa, they get to Tengen's barrier and Gojo allows himself to relax. Too soon it seems, since Toji, the sorcerer killer, sneaks up and stabs him in the back. After an intense battle, Toji knifes Gojo into unconsciousness, forcing him to rely on defense and forget offense completely. At that moment, Gojo understood how to use reverse curse technique while he was dying and healed himself. By the time he's back for revenge, Riko and her maid are dead, but that doesn't help him from annihilating Toji for what had happened prior. But worse was the organization that hired him, which nearly sent him down a dark path if Geto weren't there to convince him to keep doing good. Being someone who stood above everyone else, it would be hard for Satoru not to get used to seeing death as commonplace. But it didn't mean there weren't people who affected him with their passing. But a year later, he's too busy doing solo missions, maybe to distract himself and grow strong enough to defend everyone, and lose his classmates while he's away. Nanami even wondered why Gojo just didn't do everything on his own to avoid this kind of tragedy. That, along with a terrible town, pushes Geto to snap, and Gojo tries to take him down, but can't. He wanted to be a Jujutsu sorcerer to help his allies, not to kill his friend turned curse user. Later on, Gojo finds Toji's abandoned kid and helps Megumi to stay away from his clan, while also protecting his stepsister Fumiki. After some training, Gojo brings Megumi on missions with him sometimes, and on one occasion they saved a girl named Hana Kurusu, who Gojo teased might fall for Megumi, which she kind of does. A man blessed with gifts and talent, Satoru would appreciate someone like Megumi who wanted to use his power for protecting his family rather than raising his standing in the jiu-jitsu world. Not to mention, the 10 Shadows technique could come close to his techniques in the right scenario. When not traveling and doing missions, Gojo works as a teacher at the Tokyo branch of Jujutsu High, and his former teacher, Yaga, is now the principal there. At first, Gojo has 3 first-year students, Maki Zenin, Toge Inumaki, and Panda, but following a brutal massacre, an extra boy is brought to the attention of the higher-ups. Gojo, being the softy that he is, can't just let them end Yuta's life when he has the potential to do so much good with the right mentoring. Being the superpower that he is, the higher-ups can't really go against his decision, unless Yuta causes too much death and destruction, of course. This also turns out to be the first time we see Gojo pulling rank on them, due to his place in the jiu-jitsu world. You wouldn't want to make Superman a threat, right? Unfortunately, Gojo's also a pretty iffy teacher and doesn't warn his class about the deep, monstrous well of power within Yuta. I think this is because he was confident he can control whatever consequences might happen. Regardless, Gojo's true to his word and helps Yuta become a better sorcerer and good at protecting himself and others. That also makes him a very interesting prospect for Gojo's old pal, Suguru Geto, who has plans to eliminate all the non-sorcerers in the world, or Japan at least. Gojo senses Geto's cursed energy after a mission that was meant to be simple turned deadly. And lo and behold, Suguru's got his arm around Yuta, trying to bring him to his side of things. Thankfully, Gojo's there to put a stop to any possible kidnapping, and Yuta's got a strong conviction of his own. But it's never that easy to get rid of someone intent on changing the status quo. Geto vows to attack 2 major spots with his collection of curses, and he does. But he makes sure to go elsewhere while everyone's distracted. That event is called the Night Parade of 100 Demons. So, on Christmas Eve, Gojo busies himself facing off against Geto's adopted family, specifically Miguel, while he sends his students to help protect Yuta and Maki at the school. When he arrives, Geto's half-cooked but alive enough to recover if left alone. With a heavy heart and still clinging to the friendship they had, he ends his friend for good. Or so he thinks. And there's no way that was easy for him, especially knowing Geto was one of the few jujitsu users who truly knew him when he was younger. No one else experienced the trauma of the Star Plasma mission the way that they did. Afterwards, Gojo acts as if nothing happened, and even jokes about being distantly related to Yuta, which partly explains their crazy jujitsu gifts. Speaking of which, let's take a moment to go through just what makes Gojo the strongest recent sorcerer in Japan. Let's keep it simple, since Gege seems to take a sick pleasure in explaining things as confusingly as possible. First off, Gojo won the genetic jackpot by inheriting not 1, but 2 of his clan's techniques. Limitless on its own is good, but the 6 eyes just makes controlling it and using it so much better. Just to give you an idea, the last time the 6 eyes was seen was 100 years ago, and the previous user of both was 400 years ago. Thanks to Limitless and its control of space at an atomic level, Gojo can use blue to create a pulling effect with cursed energy that's produced. By pulling, I mean it draws whatever's around him with enough speed and force to destroy matter, especially when it's the maximum cursed energy output form. And blue's just the enhanced version of Infinity, which is the base form. On the flip side, red is both positive cursed energy, like what's used in reverse curse technique for healing, and means to push away all matter. In fact, seeing as it's positive energy, it has double the effectiveness of blue. That's not even taking into account if it was used against curses. And the natural next step, since we're playing with colors, is the combination of both to create hollow purple. In other words, Gojo decided to take his ultimate pushing and pulling techniques and force them together to create an invisible mass that destroys everything in its path by sucking in and moving forward at the same time. But we need to take a step back because you shouldn't see Gojo as just a blessed child given all the gifts needed to be the best. With time, he became an expert at hand-to-hand combat. His agility, strength, and endurance are also top tier, and he has an insanely high battle IQ. Maybe from having to come up with rainbow techniques to use, but also realizing that he could perfect infinity as the ultimate brain-dead defense helps him focus on other things during a confrontation. Gojo's feats don't stop there. Unsurprisingly, he can use Black Flash and has a huge pool of cursed energy like Yuta. However, because of the 6 eyes, he can control how much leaks out and barely depletes his reserve. And let's not forget that he taught himself how to use reverse curse technique on the brink of death. As for domains, Gojo's is called Unlimited Void and basically traps you in a hellscape of information, bombarding your senses to the point of paralysis. Sounds a lot like ADHD. That aside, he can also use the basic counters that other sorcerers would need to survive, like Simple Domain and Falling Blossom Emotion, both great ways to avoid insta-death in a targeted domain. But Gojo doesn't need to use those tactics until a specific moment in his life, which we'll get to later. Getting back to his adult life, Gojo has a whole new set of freshmen to break in, including Megumi, who's long known his carefree ways, clueless Yuji, and feisty Nobara. But let's backtrack a bit. Megumi and Nobara were guaranteed to be first year, but Yuji came out of nowhere. After a coincidental finding of an item by his paranormal club, Yuji becomes an unlikely vessel for the most powerful curse in existence. This obviously draws the attention of both the higher-ups and Gojo, who's a sucker for helping the naive and young from being put down before they can reach their full potential. Not to mention, Gojo likely sees Yuji as a means to redeem himself for missing the darkness building in his best friend before it was too late. Long story short, Gojo makes the old council members delay Yuji's execution, giving him more time to enjoy life and make a difference in the world among peers. And besides Geto's unfortunate downfall, this might be a way to make up for Riko's death, the innocent girl he meant to keep safe and alive. And knowing the way that things can change on a dime, Gojo also preemptively asks Yuta to watch over Yuji in case anything should happen. But those antiquated higher-ups are probably fed up with Gojo doing whatever he wants, and that leads them to purposely get Yuji killed during a time when Gojo's away on one of his trips away from school. Gojo returns, more than ready to take his rage out on them, but chooses to rely on his techniques instead. Thankfully, Yuji revives and Gojo keeps him hidden while training him in secret, preparing him for the exchange event. I'm sure part of that decision was because Gojo wanted to gleefully shove it in their faces. After explaining the difference between cursed energy and cursed techniques, Gojo's on his way to a meeting with Yaga when an unregistered special grade curse blocks his way. You know the one, the volcano head guy with a name similar to his. Despite Jogo being warned not to confront Gojo for obvious reasons, here we are. Jogo's cockiness gets him thrashed and thrown across a sea of trees, with Gojo basically bouncing him like a basketball. Not only that, but he sends him flying into a small body of water and leaves him there. Not forever, of course. That would be irresponsible. It gives Gojo just enough time for the next flex, getting Yuji at their training area and teleporting them to this battle to continue it as a crash course in domain. Listen, if you're the strongest and you know it, everything can be safely used as a teachable moment. Needless to say, Gojo's not the least bit worried and taunts Mount Fuji into opening his domain so that he could show Yuji both the dangers and counters of it. With his student close to him, he protects Yuji from the impossibly hot lava splashing around, and what comes next is defeat of epic proportions for Jogo, who tempted fate by coming for Gojo's life. With the curse unable to speak, hear, feel, or do much of anything, his head is ripped off with one quick twist. But Gojo's anything but stupid. He has to question such a vocal and intelligent curse about his plans. Gojo keeps him alive, which turns out to be quite the mistake since Hanami, another special grade, comes to his rescue and flees with his disembodied head. The way that earthened curse is able to both hide their presence and exude smells powerful enough to put even Gojo under a temporary trance worries him, a threat for the future. When that mess is resolved, Gojo trains Yuji some more, but can't do it forever. He gets his underclassman, Nanami Kento, to continue watching over him until the exchange event finally starts. He knows Nanami would be a good influence on Yuji and show him a different side of their world. And also, Gojo still needs to travel around taking down curses. Right before the school exchange, Gojo makes a big show of Yuji being alive, rubbing it in the Kyoto principal's face, as one of the more conservative members. But he's practically thrown Yuji to the wolves by doing this. For one, Gakuganji will tell all of his like-minded buddies about how Gojo can't be trusted, and of course about how they should take care of Yuji again. But that second plan comes quicker than the first. You see, he tells all his students to kill Yuji right away, and to pretend that it was an accident during the event. But there's more trouble that awaits them all. Somehow, the special grade curses have discovered this exchange location, and are attacking the students. All the teachers rush to get involved, with Gojo being the only one completely locked out of the veil that's placed down. He tries to force his way in, but there's been a mechanism created to make sure that it won't be easy. Eventually, Gojo smashed his way through and floats in the sky like a messiah for the students, and Deathbringer for the curses. In a split second, he can tell how much Yuji has grown thanks to Toto's help. The curse user stupid enough to face him gets his limbs turned into string cheese, and Hanami doesn't risk being the next victim. That doesn't stop Gojo from launching Hollow Purple to try and damage the curse before it can get away though. What this debacle tells Gojo is that someone is a traitor, and they're sharing information about the students with the enemy. He knows he can't trust those connected to Yuji's attempted murder, so he asks Uruhime, the Kyoto teacher, to help him figure out the source. And he also pays Mei a large sum to recommend his students to be promoted, knowing that she'll do anything for the right price. Not long after the traitor is discovered and unfortunately killed, Halloween arrives with a violent event. In Shibuya, a large number of regular people are trapped within a curtain. They're largely in the dark, except for the name that can set them free, Satoru Gojo. Every sorcerer of high level is called in, with everyone well aware that this is some sort of trap. Does this scare Gojo? Nah, he's the best, remember? As soon as he arrives, he goes in alone, with the others staying outside of the veil. That's the first big mistake. Even Yuji can't understand why he wouldn't have any backup for such an intense situation. Gojo notes that most of the people around aren't aware of the cursed energy or curses. That's when he senses the same special grade curses he's faced before, Jogo and Hanami. But there's an added bonus, a cursed human hybrid who keeps his distance. For the most part, Gojo just toys with them, not really taking them on fully since he can't risk injuring the people around. On the other hand, they've also found a way to counter his infinity, forcing Gojo to be a more active participant. But that's when he shows off his speed and martial arts prowess, beating them into submission. That's the second mistake. He kills Nanami instead of Jogo, and after losing a partner, Jogo doesn't hold back and forces Choso, the hybrid, to help him stall for time until Mahito's side of things is ready. A train rolls down the tracks, providing false hope for the trapped people and unleashing a swarm of transfigured humans at them. Gojo can't just take his time and question them anymore. He has to act fast. As they continue to slaughter humans in front of him, knowing he won't open his domain and cause harm himself, they're proven wrong. Mahito's too slippery to catch, and Choso's smart enough to stay out of range. So Gojo takes a gamble, opening his unlimited void for 0.2 seconds, and using the ensuing paralysis to clean up the threats. He eradicates 1,000 transfigured humans in 5 minutes. Even for him, this turns out to be a lot, and has him out of breath by the end, with Jogo, Mahito, Choso, and the other threats still alive. That moment, that brief time when he's catching his breath, is enough for fake Geto to step in and keep him in place. Gojo's domain may trap people in their thoughts, but all it took was seeing his dead best friend to accomplish the same feat. In seconds, Gojo sucked into the prison realm just as planned, definitely kicking himself for falling in this trap. Even though he can feel that it's not really Geto, despite his techniques telling him otherwise, it's too late to get out. He has to rely on Yuta now, just like he planned for. Nevertheless, once inside, Gojo tries to break out and causes it to fall on the ground and smash the floor tiles. Still, he can't do much else, trapped there until they free him. Because we all know Gojo wouldn't kill himself to get out. And now he has a target to come after once he's been let out. That's not including the higher-ups who deemed him a traitor and forced his allies into hiding. Now let's go into the post-Shibuya gap year, where Yuji and his friends eventually find Hanakarusu and Angel and use her curse technique to unlock the prison realm and free Gojo. The very instant Gojo's out, he wastes no time going right to the imposter using his friend's body. He's about to massacre him, and with good reason, when Sukuna steps in and blocks it. Had Kenjaku been alone, there's no denying that Gojo would have made quick work of him. It's now November 18th, with him having been sealed on Halloween. Gojo sets their confrontation date for Christmas Eve, just like Geto had years ago. It's easier to remember that way, or so he claims. But clearly, he's feeling emotional about the friend he killed having his body used by an evil being like Kenjaku. Now the date is set for Gojo versus Sukuna, the battle to decide essentially everything. Afterwards, Gojo's caught up on what he missed after he was sealed, and man, is it a lot. But most importantly, Nanami and Nobara have been fatally wounded. Yaga was executed, and Shibuya was decimated. As for the students, Inumaki lost an arm, Maki's been awakened and permanently scarred, and Toto's lost his curse technique. After such a catastrophic series of events, you'd expect Gojo to come for Gakuganji first, since he carried out the execution of his teacher. But no, he understands that the real culprit is the higher-ups, and that the Kyoto principal didn't share Yaga's secret techniques with them after all. More than anything, Gojo only blames himself for letting the world fall into such disarray. If he hadn't been sealed, his friends and mentors could have survived. Perhaps he could have prevented Megumi's body from being taken over by Sukuna as well. Something of note is that the higher-ups are all killed, but by who isn't clear. Considering their power and similar mindsets, it could either be Gojo, Yuta, or even Kenjaku, but with many fans speculating that it was likely Yuta due to the gruesome scene left behind. If it were Gojo, we know he could just throw out a blue or a purple and they'd just be sucked into oblivion. It's also like I said, it's also very possible it could have been Kenjaku as well. On the chosen date of the Gojo versus Sukuna battle, Uruhime buffs Gojo using her curse technique, while everyone else stands by as backup or support for the ultimate fighter of this era. Without hesitation, Gojo launches a massive and highly destructive hollow purple towards the King of Curses. The attack is unexpectedly effective and decimates Sukuna's arm, but the fight's just starting. A calamitous battle ensues with Sukuna and Gojo going all out against each other. Not only is there no one to interrupt them, but there's also a vast amount of open space for them to use. Gojo also employs Simple Domain to protect his body from slashes. Likewise, he uses Falling Blossom Emotion to protect his domain from Malevolent Shrine shredding technique. When his curse technique is running low, he focuses reverse curse technique on his brain to restore it, risking his body getting injured. After shrinking and destroying both their domains, the battle moves into unknown territory. And that's when Gojo wonders why Sukuna hasn't used Maharaga or the 10 Shadows technique yet. Despite struggling with his domain, Gojo eventually manages to unleash his domain faster than Sukuna and injures him with Unlimited Void, even if it's less than a second. But of course, that's when Maharaga and his adaptability is let loose too. Gojo's in a bad place, but Sukuna can't open his domain anymore either. Though Maharaga adapts to Gojo's technique slowly, Gojo's not beaten yet. In fact, he cleverly uses blue openly, with red hidden from view to launch at the right moment. And he lands a black flash right after. Even so, this challenge just reminds him of his life and death battle with Toji, and how he was able to overcome that in the past. With Sukuna drawing out more of the 10 Shadows, and even a fused creature named Agito, Gojo knows now more than ever that he has to make this fight quick and decisive. If it goes on too long, Maharaga will adapt to all his curse techniques. Surprisingly, Gojo amplifies his attacks through chanting, which both gives the enemy more time to counter and enhances the effect due to that. A greatly strengthened hollow purple hits Maharaga, destroying him, with the explosion reaching Gojo and Sukuna too. It doesn't injure Gojo much since it's its own technique, but that doesn't help him defend against Sukuna's improved slash that can now cut through the world itself. He was able to learn this from Maharaga as he slowly adapted to Gojo's infinity. But with Maharaga now killed, Sukuna is able to use his improved dismantle on Sukuna, which is able to bypass infinity. meaning Gojo can no longer block something that powerful, and Gojo lies bleeding with his torso on the ground and his legs standing, in a strange reflection of how Toji died standing as well. Afterwards, Gojo shows up in what looks like the afterlife, with everyone there from his time as a student, even Toji, in the background at least. They all look like they did during the Star Plasma Vessel mission, and it allows him to make peace with his closest companions, like Nanami and Geto, among many others. There's an interesting conversation between them about how going north means starting a new life, and heading south leads to the old self that he was. We aren't shown Gojo's decision, but either way, it leaves his story with some mystery. Later, Gojo's body disappears from the battlefield, with Sukuna realizing Yui Yui is the one taking any fallen fighters away. He, like us, knows that could only point to either trying to resurrect Gojo or finding a way to use him against Sukuna. In both cases, it would cause problems for him later. And guess what? Gojo's back, sort of. It's actually Yuta Kotsu using Kenjaku's body snatching technique thanks to Rika. It was something that caused friction within their group beforehand, but Yuta saw it as a way to lessen Satoryu's burden of always being the monster. They take a moment to discuss their distant ancestry, and Gojo questions whether Yuta's relatives might have actually surpassed his. So he expects Yuta to do the same if he were to fall. Getting back to the monster conversation, we find out that Gojo was the one to slaughter all the higher-ups in that bloodbath, and not Rika like many were theorizing. Not only did he take on the responsibility of exterminating them all himself, but he didn't want his older students to have to witness it. So Gojo may be a lot of things, but he's definitely not a monster. He just plays one to protect everyone else. They all stayed outside the room. No time to worry about that when they're trying to get rid of the King of Curses though. But what's funny is that Sukuna's been roughed up enough that seeing Satoryu back from the dead actually worries him for a second. As soon as Pseudo Gojo enters the battle, he launches his domain, which Sukuna was expecting. But Satoryu had also come up with a way to deal with Sukuna's open domain, and likely would have won if not for Maharaga. And even though it's not Gojo using it himself, Yuta employs the solution of shrinking his barrier, something he's only capable of because of the replacement training he had done with the late great Gojo. When he was alive, he could keep it active for 3 minutes, yet Sukuna counters this tactic by shaving off the range of his domain's effects, striking the outer part of Unlimited Void. The goal is to destroy Sukuna within 3 minutes, with the Curse Master thinking the same. Meanwhile, Rika weeps while she holds Yuta's inactive body, and his eyes close. There are already problems with Yuta adapting to Limitless and Gojo's body being taller than his, but at least he can access some of Gojo's memory, giving us more time with him and using the advice for battle. Yuta used a modified version of Cursed Speech to charge off Purple, one of Gojo's strongest techniques, but his lack of experience with it smashed the domain expansion too. But from using the domain and so many powerful techniques, the body transfer halted. Both Kenjaku's and Gojo's techniques couldn't last as long as intended, and Yuta collapsed in Satoryu's body. That outcome doesn't change anything for our deceased sensei since he had already passed, but the fear was that Yuta wouldn't be able to leave his body. Thankfully, Rika's broken abilities saved the day and the guy. So to anyone hoping Gojo would return, I'm sorry to say that he won't. He did leave letters to the MC trio though. Well, he spoke to Yuji because he was there, but Nobara was given the location of her mother in case she wanted to see her. And Megumi was finally told about how Gojo killed his dad, Toji, something he tried to tell him at least a decade ago. As for his words to Yuji, unlike the overconfident and powerful pinnacle of Jujutsu he's made out to be, Gojo offered a more vulnerable side. It's during a flashback to their replacement training in pairs. He tells Yuji to make himself okay with a world where Gojo doesn't exist. In other words, they would be fine even if he lost against Sukuna for whatever reason. He said this not to upset Yuji, but to encourage him to stay on the path that he's on, as a good person, fighting for others, and caring for them when they pass. But Gojo also knew that they would be stronger than him at some point in the future in their own ways. See, Gojo represented an antiquated view of who held power in the jiu-jitsu world, with him being from the big three clans. They guarded their inherited techniques and fought for dominance. Yuji broke that mold by being created for a purpose that he defied. Gojo believed someone like him would be perfect to lead jiu-jitsu users forward. So with that in mind, he told Yuji something similar to what Nanami had: "I'm counting on you." And those words helped Yuji to forgive a curse user enough to suggest that he join them as a legitimate jiu-jitsu sorcerer when he faced his punishment. No matter what Gege thinks, you were great, Gojo. But that is also his full, complete story. If you liked the video, guys, please give it a like. And if you want to see more Jujutsu Kaisen content like this, please subscribe as well. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.